It's just a huge honor today to be podcast interviewing Jay Bowman, an orthodontist from Kalamazoo, Michigan. Your bio, Jay, is unbelievable. He's a diplomat of the American Board, a member of the Angle Society, a fellow of both the International and American College of Dentists. He's on the faculty of the University of Michigan, St. Louis University, Case Western, and Seton Hill University. He received the Angle Research Award and the Alumni Merit Award from St. Louis University. He's a contributing editor for the American Journal of Orthodontics, the Journal of Clinical Orthodontics, and Seminars in Orthodontics. He is co-author of the book, Mini Implants in Orthodontics, Innovative Anchorage Concepts. He has over 150 articles and book chapters published. He has also developed dozens of innovative products, including butterfly system braces, Horseshoe Jet molar distalizer, Kilroy springs, and monkey hooks for impacted canines, clear collection instruments from Hu-Friedy and Aligner Chewies for clear aligners, among others. A couple of his bucket list experience was speaking for the last two World Federation of Orthodontists meetings, including a standing room only talk in London. As an amateur musician, Jay was lucky enough to be invited to play keyboards on stage in Italy with his friends in the iconic rock band Los Lobos on their 40th anniversary tour. My God, that must have been cool. Most recently, he spent 2 weeks at the Milton Sims visiting professor and external examiner at the University of Adelaide in Australia. Gosh darn, it just goes on and on and on. I literally could read 2 pages. It's just an honor to have you on the show today.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be a part of this. I just was unexpected to be invited to do this, so thank you, Howard. I really appreciate it. By the way, you can tell them that also that I'm on work release and will work for food. So
So I've been to 100 concerts. How do you go to a concert the next day you know you're playing with the band? How does that happen?
Well, it was by accident. I was out in Las Vegas years ago, and we were going to the Los Lobos show, and I was asking the merchandise guy if I could get something autographed. My entire office is filled with autographed memorabilia, and the guy says, I don't know, why don't you ask him? They're standing behind you. So I turned around, and I'm nose to nose with Louis Perez. And I asked him the question, and he says, well, come backstage after the show. I said, yeah, that's really going to happen. But it did, and we hit it off. I hit it off with all the guys, and they've been so kind and so generous. I've been in the recording studio with them when they just made their new album. They took me to England on tour, on the Neil Young tour, to Bob Dylan tour, and then through Europe last year up to the Montreux Jazz Fest. So during that time, they'd asked me if I would play, and I'm just an amateur musician. And finally, I said, okay, we're in Italy, and I said, I'll do it. I wasn't nervous to play. It's that, you know, people are there to see Los Lobos, not some amateur guy on keyboards, but it was a great experience, and I'm thankful they let me do that. I played one song, that was it, and I'm done.
So you mentioned Bob Dylan. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature.
That's amazing, isn't it?
And he hasn't said a word since. Why do you think he hasn't said anything?
I'm not sure. I have no idea. Bob does what Bob does, and he doesn't really have to answer to anybody at this point. So I'm sure he's honored, but he's rather a bizarre character. You know, he does something similar to what you do with music, giving these like podcasts or radio casts. I think it's on maybe on Sirius XM he has this, where he plays music and talks, and a lot of it's just interesting history about music. So a lot of my friends are Dylan buddies, and obviously Los Lobos has backed Bob Dylan in the past. They're friends with him as well.
What I love the most about Bob Dylan is he stayed true to himself. I mean, I don't think anybody could have told him, dude, you're a good singer. You got a great voice.
Right.
I mean, he sounded so strange. And so I remember so many kids when I was little saying, gosh, how did he become a singer? And it's like, because he believed in himself.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
I mean, Mick Jagger was one of the biggest sex symbols in the 70s and the 80s. He's this little skinny, scrawny kid. I mean, he just believed it, so he made everyone else believe it.
Yeah, he exudes personality, that's for sure. Well, both of them do.
So you've been an orthodontist. We've both been in this field for 30 years. Gosh, orthodontics has really changed in the last 3 decades. How would you describe now versus when you got out of school?
Well, when I was a resident at St. Louis and I completed the program in '85, half of our patients were still banded and half were bonded. So the biggest revolution in orthodontics is the addition of bonding adhesives. And second one would probably be the use of super elastic wires. Certainly has changed things as well. But just the fact that we can bond brackets on teeth is really pretty an astonishing advent within orthodontics.
Yeah, I would say our career from the 80s and the 90s was a dental materials revolution, going from
Absolutely.
gold and amalgam to all this adhesive bonding. And I would say that defined the 80s and 90s dental materials explosion of technology. And then
Yes.
the last 20 years, from 2000 on, it was the digital revolution.
Correct. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the advent of using now scanning, digital scanning, which kind of came from the dental use in the creation of crowns and things using scanners, and now we're doing scanned impressions, and of course you can do digital setups like with Invisalign or with SureSmile. It really has changed things dramatically.
And I would also say that when you and I got out of school to now, the biggest brand in all of dentistry in the consumer's eyes, I mean, we already had Crest, Colgate, Listerine, Oral-B, all that, was the word Invisalign. I mean, it seems like if you're a girl between the ages of 15 and 30 living between here, Indonesia, Japan,
Right.
Brazil, they've all heard of Invisalign.
Yeah, it's like Kleenex. They've become the name, and so you see folks say that they do Invisalign. They actually may be doing a different product, but they aren't saying clear aligners. They're saying we use Invisalign.
Yeah, and they could be at the verge of losing that. In my opinion, I'm a dentist, not a lawyer, but whenever your brand becomes generic, you lose your copyright. Like when people start saying "hand me a Kleenex" and it
Right.
wasn't the brand Kleenex, they lose Kleenex.
Right.
When people start saying "go make me a Xerox copy" and they're using a
Yes.
Canon copier,
Hmm.
it's no longer a brand. And I think Invisalign is ubiquitous with clear aligners.
Yeah, I believe so too. You're right. They've become so big. It's the largest orthodontic company now in the world.
Amazing. So have you
Yeah.
been down to Costa Rica? Have you checked that out?
Long ago, I gave a lecture in Costa Rica. I was invited, and I did several of the countries in Central America. So I was in San Jose, and my interpreter, my translator, excuse me, for my lecture, I asked him. I said, "Where's the Invisalign place?" And he goes, "Well, I work there. I'll take you out there." So this is before they ever gave tours. So when it was in its infancy, I was down there to visit the place. So it was fascinating. There was basically just two orthodontists there at the time, and now of course the place has exploded. So it was great to have the chance to go see it when it was just starting out.
And I'm in here in Phoenix, so we're
Right.
about 10% of the town is Canadians,
Yes.
and a lot of my Canadian patients, a lot of them over the years, have picked up a place in Costa Rica, and they tell me they can't tell if there's more retired Canadians or Americans down there. It's really becoming a retirement community.
Yeah, my brother just got back. He was down there doing photography, and he loved it. It's been probably, I don't know, 10 years since I've been there.
Well, I call my show Dentistry Uncensored because I don't want to talk about what everybody knows or agrees on. What are the controversies in orthodontics today?
I think the controversies are never ending. They've been there since we started. I mean, if you think of the father of modern orthodontics, Edward Angle, he was a staunch non-extractionist, and we still are arguing whether or not extractions are a harmful or a beneficial thing for our patients. And it just is an argument. I don't think that anybody really wants to know the answer. At least some people seem like they don't want to know the answer. It would wreck what they're doing. So if you suddenly said we know exactly what's right and wrong, some folks are going to be sort of out in the cold. And so we keep juggling these balls up in the air without letting them land to find out what's the truth here. But the research is pretty clear. Extractions are a great thing for those that need it, those with crowding and protrusion. And trying to avoid extractions in those cases is not really to the benefit of the patient. Some people just don't deserve non-extraction treatment.
Yeah, and then you have the whole beauty thing because there's no right and wrong beauty. I mean,
That's correct.
going through college for 9 years, it was amazing what your best friends were attracted to. I mean,
Correct.
I had a friend that he never looked twice at any girl unless she was a redhead, and I mean, everybody has their thing. And I noticed like when I'm lecturing in like Indonesia, those girls take their finger and they put it from their nose to their chin. If their lips touch, that's bad. And they want to pull the two upper bicuspids and pull it back. And then you come to America and they're injecting all this Botox and derma fillers in their lips. They want these big old lips. And in Indonesia, they want them back. So when you start talking about protrusion, I mean, protrusion is the beauty of it is in the beholder.
Yes, and it's also in the face of those beheld. And there's not a single determinant, not one single specific determinant for facial beauty. Now you're talking about this finger measurement, which is in effect Bob Ricketts' aesthetic plane, which is a line drawn from the tip of the nose to the most prominent point on the chin, and then you measure the lips from that particular line. And I've been involved in a couple of studies of that. There's also been one that's been done in Korea and another one done in Mexico. What you find is that when evaluated by dentists and laypersons, when they look at before and after aesthetic results from extraction, non-extraction treatment, that they prefer the effects of extraction to a degree, as long as the patient had begun with some protrusion. In other words, the lips are full. And so it crosses all of those ethnic boundaries, except for African Americans, who prefer about 4 millimeters fuller lips than Caucasians, Asians, and Latinos. So it's interesting that those findings are almost identical for all of the groups, that they all like the effect of extraction if the patient starts out protrusive and crowded.
That's interesting with African Americans because all my restorations are gold, and the only girls in my practice that will go with gold inlays, crowns, or whatever are African Americans, and they see it as beauty and jewelry. And then when you're lecturing like Johannesburg and Soweto, sometimes they'll crown a virgin tooth
Sure.
just for beauty. It's amazing how Europeans love to decorate their entire body with gold earrings, nose pins, belly buttons, ankles, wedding rings. But when it goes to the teeth, it's no.
Right. Well, if we go back to rock and roll, there was a time when Mick Jagger had a diamond, emerald, and a sapphire, or a ruby put in his teeth. And everyone would come up and say, "Hey, Mick, you got something in your teeth." And he finally had to have them removed.
Yeah, he had to have a root canal to set that. It was so deep, wasn't it?
Really? I guess so. I don't know.
That's what a dentist told me in New Jersey, that he actually had to
Yeah.
have a root canal on that tooth. So
Wow.
I think the red flag to me is that whether it's religion or science is extremism. I mean,
That's
they
correct.
just don't entertain another view. When anything is absolute, it's an absolute red flag. And to think that 7.5 billion humans would all be, I don't believe in extraction. I mean,
Right.
really, that's a pretty big pool of people to say you don't believe in some. But I'm amazed at how many general dentists. It must be scary being an orthodontist, knowing that one of your referring doctors holds an extremist view on something they know so little about.
Well, they're the gatekeepers of orthodontics. They make the referrals in general. And so a patient their treatment is dictated by what type of referral the dentist makes. If they pick someone that is a staunch non-extractionist, the patient's going to get that kind of treatment. So they're the ultimate determinant of what type of treatment the patient will get. It's not the orthodontist, because the patient may never reach an orthodontist for a particular type of treatment because of the referral base.
Yeah, when I got out of school, pediatric dentist got all their referrals from general dentist, and then
Correct.
they got wise and started really targeting towards the OBGYNs and the pediatricians. And when I talk to pediatric dentists, when they're out there sending birthday cakes or
Right.
Thanksgiving or whatever they're trying to do, they're targeting all the pediatricians, and the pediatricians are sending them over, at 1 or 2, whereas the general dentist is waiting till the child has a bad experience at 6, then send someone over that's already traumatized. When you got out of school 30 years ago, what percent of all your referrals were B2B, dentist to orthodontist, versus now consumers on the internet just finding you without going through a gatekeeper?
Well, and when I got out, probably 85% of the patients were referred by the dentist. But in a small community like mine, there aren't that many dentists or orthodontists. So after time period, the folks in the community have a pretty good idea who you are, and they may be just getting different opinions. And so also as you age, which we have done, Howard, reluctantly,
I can't believe I'm still alive.
Yeah. What happens is you get more referrals from your patients. So as far as the internet, I find in a small community, not like Phoenix, where people are going to be searching out, say, orthodontist on the internet. In my community, they would be getting a referral from a friend or a dentist, and then backing that up by searching out your website and then seeing what you're about to decide whether or not to help them make the decision. But I don't think that we get very many patients coming with the primary source being the internet.
Um, all the data I have on my listeners is that they're going to be the overwhelming majority is dentist, not specialist, and most of them are under 30. I got a funny email yesterday from a Carl Bro in Louisiana. He says, "Hey, I just want you always say all your listeners are under 30. I'm an old fart just like you. Love your show," but it's mostly younger kids. So
Sure.
I'm gonna focus on the young kids. A lot of them are looking at young children and they're wondering when is the best time to go in there. Sometimes they look at that and they think, okay, maybe it should be a rapid palatal expander. There's a lot of one-liners where people say, they should get their first orthodontic appointment at age this or that. But right now you got 25-year-old dentists driving to work. They're an associate somewhere. What should they be looking at during pediatric exams of when you need to get this child for early interception from an orthodontist?
Well, first of all, you were describing what the American Association of Orthodontists had as a sort of a statement back in I guess the 90s, which was the best time for an appointment for an examination preliminarily was age 7. Unfortunately, that carried with it the implication that age 7 was the right time to treat. And I think that we've had so much evidence demonstrating that really a lot of early treatment is not necessary. And a lot of it is unstable. So what do I look for? Primarily for severity of crowding, severity of protrusion, and crossbites. And in 1947, Hayes Nance, for which the Nance appliance is based off of, wrote a book about mixed dentition. And he spent a long time, his entire career, working on this textbook. This is before we had a lot of research. And he said there were 3 reasons for early treatment. And that's class 2s wherein the facial appearance is markedly affected, class 3s, and also those folks with crossbites. And I subscribe to that. I've written an article about that in the past and lectured on this, that I think that's a really good laundry list. So in my practice specifically, it's only about 7 to 9% of the patients are in an early phase of treatment. So I'm always a little disturbed when I see a lot of aggressive early treatment done, when in fact, many times we could simply hold off and take care of everything in a single phase of treatment. So that's the
So
research.
you wouldn't recommend a rapid palatal? You still call it a RPE, a rapid palatal expander?
Yeah, RPE there's also other types of expanders that could be used, from Schwartz plates to quad helix, which has been around a long time too, probably since at least 1865. Those devices are also used for expansion, but the question is, what patient needs an expander? Well, it would be someone that would have a crossbite. And yet we see this used almost in a routine basis in many patients, just with the idea that we're gaining arch length or arch perimeter. But if you expand a patient without a crossbite, you're going to end up in a crossbite.
And I want you to address another controversy that I
Sure.
don't think whenever you have a group of people where everyone has 8 to 12 years of college, dentists, physicians, lawyers, they're never going to agree on anything. I always think it's when people make fun of dentists that they don't agree on anything, I always say, well, look at the Supreme Court. They're all lawyers. They're reading the exact same Constitution, and
Right.
almost every major decision in my lifetime has been 5-4. I mean,
Right.
how do you look at this Constitution, studied 8 years, practiced law for half a century, and
Right.
those guys can't even agree? So it doesn't surprise me that most dental thoughts are 5-4.
Sure.
But growing a mandible, I've heard everything from A to Z. Can you, when somebody is class 3 or mandible, too
Yeah.
little, too big, can you grow a mandible?
No. It's pretty simple. What's happening?
Did you want to think about that a little longer? You
No, I
seem to
didn't need to.
hesitate.
Yeah, it's pretty basic understanding of anatomy and facial development, and that is that the mandible is going to grow. but it's going to grow in such a way that you're not going to be able to modify that dramatically, except for maybe in direction. So what's happening in the correction of a class 2, and it doesn't matter whether you're using headgears, elastics, functional appliances, molar distalization, whatever it is, what is really happening is that you're interrupting the dental alveolar compensation mechanism. So you could say, well, it's a maxillary or mid-face effect, a headgear effect, because the amount of mandibular growth that happens on average for a class 2 correction with a headgear versus a functional appliances are identical. So the mandible's growing, but because of dental alveolar compensation, that overgrowth of the mandible in an adolescent is not showing itself. The teeth are compensating. So if you can interrupt that with whatever mechanism that might be, from a bite plane in a headgear or elastics or functional, then you're going to see the effect of the additional mandibular growth that's occurring. Otherwise, you'll never see it. But the idea that you're stimulating the mandible to grow more is not the answer. The action is in the upper jaw. So that we don't have any mechanism that's been reliably demonstrated to grow extra mandible. I always kid that if I could grow an extra mandible, extra length, I'm going to grow some basketball players for the NBA. It's just not going to happen.
Well, I've seen some heightening surgeries they're doing around the world
Yes.
now, where they go in there and they literally separate the bone, move
Right.
it half inch apart, brace
Sure.
it, the bone fills in, and that's amazing. I want to back up all the beginning, because I've been really interested in how a separate group of doctors, anthropologists, keep posting articles on their thoughts on orthodontics, and what they're basically saying. There's been several things published on social media in the last couple of years, that when they look at human skulls from 400 years back, they don't see any malocclusions, crowding, everything's fine. And then somewhere between 400 years ago to 150 years ago, it's everywhere, every culture, every diet. First of all, do you agree with that?
I think that that's reasonable. I'm not sure that we've got an exact cause for that, except for the fact that the development of the face and jaw development, that's and the teeth, it's all polygenetic. So when you start mixing cultures, if you have an aboriginal culture that has no mixing from other sources, that pure genetics, they're going to have probably no malocclusions or minor ones. But then you start mixing people together, like Europeans and Africans and Indians, and pretty soon this mash of genes is going to come up with differences, and we all look different. And the other thing is that the anthropologists are talking about is the diet change. So when you were eating stone ground wheat and very hard diets that were not refined, and there were no refined sugars, then the cusps that we have on our teeth that we take to be so we guard them in dentistry, they actually were designed to wear down over time. And so teeth would not only wear occlusally, but they'd wear interproximally. So if you had a little bit of crowding, it'd go away with time because the teeth would wear. So we get to the 20th century with refined foods, and we're not using all of these muscles of mastication as heavily, and we've got a mixed group of genes, we end up with these malocclusions.
So the mixing of genes, that was called miscegenation. Was that correct?
Sure.
So you think a big part of it's miscegenation and then refined diets?
I think that those two are pretty good explanations as far as we can go.
And there's also a gazillion articles on the internet about that the reason these mothers are having problems nursing is tongue tied. And now there's lots of insurance companies are paying 100% to have a lady come in and examine, help you breastfeeding. Do you think that's extremist or true? Or I mean,
I don't
how did a 2 million-year-old species all of a sudden have all these tongue tied babies that can't nurse?
exactly. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I will have folks have their ankylosing lingual frenum removed if they have speech problems. If the tongue is simply unable to be lifted towards the palate. But even then, there's no guarantee that having that done is going to improve speech, because speech is a learned behavior. So I don't know. I think that does seem a little extreme, but I'm not an expert on that.
Um, Let's go to headgear. What was the incidence of headgear 30 years ago when you got out of school versus today?
Well, there's several different types of headgear. The typical cervical headgear or Klein headgear, and then also we had the J-hook type headgear, which is more of a tweed technique, which is uh, virtually started south of you down in Tucson. The headgear when I was a student in St. Louis was pretty common, and today I tell folks all the time in lectures, I love the effective headgear. We know it works. The problem is the patients just won't wear it. So we've had to come up with alternatives. And so the alternatives would consist of things perhaps like mini screws or more dependence on elastics. Functional appliances came along out of Europe in the late 70s, early 80s as sort of a headgear replacement. But the problem is, once again, compliance. So we're back to that old issue that the patient's compliance itself is the single most important factor in treatment success.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many selfies on Facebook with headgear on.
No.
Let's go. Let's go to another. Hate to open up too controversial or too dentistry uncensored, but when you go to the camps of TMJ, I mean, when you talk to endodontists, they pretty much all reasonably agree on all their beliefs. Pediatric dentists, I mean, everybody believes, there's a mostly common ground in almost everything we do in dentistry until you go to occlusion, and then all hell breaks loose. And
Right.
and there's dentists out there that think that orthodontists, they blow out the curve of speed, the curve of Wilson, all these TMJ. I don't. I think it's the most controversial thing in all of dentistry, and especially between a general dentist and a referring specialist orthodontist. What are your thoughts about all these? I'm sure you're well aware of all the beliefs on occlusion. Some say, well, orthodontists take them from canine guidance to group function, blow out the curve of speed, curve of Wilson, blah 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 blah. What do you think of what's your current status of your religious belief on occlusion?
I don't have a religious belief. I certainly deal with lots of people who do. And it's once again one of those things that if suddenly, the creator came down and said, we're going to meet at 5 o'clock at the nearby baseball stadium, and I'm going to give you the answer. What is the right answer here? Most folks that have these religious beliefs about particular types of occlusion don't really want that answer because it might completely undermine what they're doing. So I think that there has to be some common sense here. Certainly, we want teeth to fit together in an excellent, ideal manner, but what is that? And I don't think anybody has definitive proof as to what is the perfect arrangement of teeth. The old joke is tell Stone Age man he needs cuspid rise occlusion. They didn't have cusps, they wore them down because they were designed to wear. So today we're trying to keep these cusps because we have these refined diets, but is that exactly the right thing? I don't know. But in orthodontics, our job is to get teeth straight. And we have to please not only ourselves with our standards, but we have to please the referring dentists in whatever they believe their standards to be. So it depends kind of, again, like we said, the gatekeeper, you have to find a way to provide what they're looking for.
Some of these occlusion, well, and I'll call them extremists. I think you're an extremist when you're not willing to entertain other people's
Sure.
thoughts, what they've seen. But a lot of them will say on Dental Town that clear aligners are dead at the gate because you're putting something in between their teeth, you're opening the bite, and if you're going to go with clear aligners, you've already messed up their bite.
I don't see where that's the issue because you can still close bites down to some degree with clear aligners, and we use clear aligners for retainers. They're between the occlusion between the teeth, and yet when you remove them, the teeth fit together. So I'm not sure that there's also extremes as to what people believe you can do with aligners as well. So I think common sense has to prevail, and there has to be some meeting of the minds at some point. But the folks that don't want to use clear aligners, that's fine. I get it. There's some folks that only use clear aligners and don't want to use braces. That's fine. I get it. I'm sort of in the middle of the road of that.
You're one of those functional moderates.
I guess so. I like that. Yes. A
So
Unitarian for occlusion.
a Unitarian for occlusion. I love that. So most orthodontists that I hang out with say that now clear aligners or Invisalign is about 20% of their practice. Is that about what you're seeing?
That would be accurate for my practice. I have a lot of really good friends that are some of the major Invisalign providers that almost their entire practice is Invisalign, and they do an excellent job with that. I've even seen surgical cases done with Invisalign. But when you say Invisalign only, what they're also adding on are buttons and rubber bands and other adjuncts, or maybe sectional mechanics, or mini screws. I do all those things too. So it's not entirely accurate that it's only Invisalign.
Well, when someone I'm people are always running business ideas with me for a new product, this that, and I always say, is it faster? Is it easier? Is it higher quality, lower in cost? Unfortunately, Invisalign blew the last one. It wasn't lower in cost.
No,
So they came out with an innovation that had a $1,000 lab bill with it. So, but is it faster, easier, higher in quality?
I don't think it's faster. I tell patients that the treatment time is the same as our braces. As far as quality, I wouldn't offer it if I didn't believe I was going to get the same results for a particular case. Now, there might be instances where you might be doing sort of a compromised treatment where you're saying, okay, we're going to just straighten a few teeth, and we're not going to correct the rest of the occlusion. That is far and few between in my practice, but some people do that. So I think that the Invisalign product is excellent. They, however, don't like to play well with others. The company is, I guess they don't have to.
What do you mean they don't like to play well with others?
As far as people offering suggestions or innovations, they don't seem very accepting of folks' opinions. They just most recently are now suggesting the possibility that you can change aligners every week. I've done that for years, and it's just interesting that they finally have made that decision themselves.
What do you think of them now going direct to the consumer, bypassing orthodontists?
I think that was the original plan all along, that you would, in effect, sort of have a kiosk at a mall and somehow get some sort of an impression. Today it would be a digital scan, or even do a late night TV type of thing. But they ran into a problem in that originally the product didn't work as described. It was very unwieldy. You couldn't treat everything. There were things that just weren't going to work well because the design hadn't been completed. So today, you can make the system predictable, but there are tricks to do that. In those of us that have stuck around long enough and done enough, you've really worked hard. But that happened with braces. The evolution of braces took that. So Invisalign has the most unique opportunity of any orthodontic company in gathering information. I think they've unfortunately missed the boat to some degree because they can find out how things work very quickly. So we take a scan of a patient today, and then we take a scan of that patient at the end, if we would do that, and you can see what happened. You would be able to determine what worked and what didn't. So the only thing they're missing out on is offering something to the orthodontist to take that final scan, not just for retainers, but to have as a record of information for what actually happened in treatment. So you can go back and make changes in real time rather than have just engineers coming up with theoretical, say, attachments and doing them on typodonts. You've got a real world of millions of patients to gather that information. They say, well, we're getting refinement information. But if you had final data from those at the end of treatment, what an incredible database to be able to mine from for all types of treatment.
I want to go back to the millennials answering mom's questions. And one of the hardest questions they get regarding orthodontics is, you know, does my child need this, or is this cosmetic? And where do you draw the line between orthodontics is just getting your hair done, making you look pretty, smile, more likely to get married, versus no, as health, you need this? Where do you draw the line between oral health and beauty?
Well, I certainly believe that there are some benefits to orthodontics for dental health, and also perhaps some for medical health, but they're small, And so the question is, what patient needs orthodontic treatment? It would generally be the patient that wants orthodontic treatment. And as a consequence, the decision isn't, is it a necessity, because it's an elective procedure. Orthodontics is a service. It's based in science and it has value. But as far as preventing major disease, probably not. So you don't just want an appendicite or appendectomy, you need an appendectomy. It may not be exactly the same for orthodontics.
Well, some people, I'm old school. I mean, I'm when I was in school, they used to teach a concept which is no longer believed. It was called the BMW, the biological minimum width. And if the teeth weren't straight and you didn't have a millimeter and a half bone between all the teeth, it'd be more susceptible to periodontal disease. That's been thrown out the window pretty much.
Well, I think that obviously, if you don't have enough bone width, you could have issues with periodontal disease. But I think just like you, I'm old school. When we were residents, if or dental students, if you recall, we were taught that anybody could get periodontal disease if you didn't floss and you didn't brush your teeth. And we subsequently found out that there's some bad bugs that you got to have in order to get periodontal disease. And you may have to have some genetic makeup to be susceptible to those bad bugs. So it's not just as simple as, you know, if you could have people that have horrible oral hygiene and never get periodontal disease, or they may have a very thin bone and may not get periodontal disease. But those that are susceptible, they're in trouble.
You know, I thought it was very interesting this year when the media showed the entire world that dentists, in fact, had no evidence on flossing, and it makes you wonder that whole evidence-based dentistry, evidence-based medicine. I mean, it's a beautiful concept, but we might be several hundred years away between having an evidence-based computer making all these decisions because, like they so eloquently showed us, there is no research to prove that floss works.
Well, I briefly read the article you're describing, and there's some questions about the methodology. If I remember, that was a meta-analysis, but I can't recall exactly what it was. But it called into question more so the statistical technique, the research technique, than I think it really called into question flossing. So I would be hesitant to throw out flossing, just like when we were told that the essential oils in Listerine precluded us from needing to floss as well. And we haven't seen that the floss has been tossed completely in either aspect. So remember that the evidence-based treatments are based not only on the best available scientific evidence, but also on clinical experience. So you can't just base it on a single article or even just a series of articles. And we see that with questions asked in orthodontics. Well, we have to have a randomized clinical trial. Some people claim that's a religion, that if you don't have that, then you don't have evidence. Well, there's a lot of questions that are never going to be answered by randomized clinical trials. For instance, if we want to answer the extraction, non-extraction question, you can't ethically go in, get a sample of patients, and say, Mom, your child is going to start in this study, and I'm going to flip a coin, and if it comes up heads, we're going to do extractions. And if it comes up tails, it's non-extraction. The parents are not going to accept that. It'd be just like determining whether or not surgery is better or not. You just can't ethically do that. So you're not going to be able to answer some questions. And the other problem is with most randomized clinical trials, it takes so long, especially in orthodontics, to get an answer that most times we don't care what the question was by the time we're done.
It would be like you'll never get that study for parachuting either.
No, that's right. Exactly.
We have to prove whether or not this parachute works. And
Yes.
you got head, so you will not get a
Sign here.
parachute. And the other guy will. So let's see what happens. I want to go into every specialist sees general dentist doing, the same, doing this work too, endodontist, get to evaluate general dentist,
Sure.
root canals all day long. What is your general feeling of the orthodontics done by general dentists? I mean, there's so many big brands. There's 6 month smiles, 6 months braces, power procs. A lot of dentists are doing Invisalign. As an orthodontist, so decorated as you, 30 years, what is your general view of What do you see with general dentists doing ortho? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Do they do a good job, a bad job?
I don't see enough of the results to make a lot of comments. My general feeling is that the reason I got into orthodontics is to be able to do one thing exceptionally well. And I know that I get into trouble in situations where I don't think I would. I'll give you the example I'll give is there was someone that called me several years ago that was doing Invisalign, and he called up and he said, "Well, this isn't working the way that the technician in Costa Rica set up the clinch check." And I said, "Well, what did you ask for?" And he said, "No, they just set it up for me." Well, who's making the diagnosis and treatment plan? So he said, "So what do you do when you run into these problems?" I said, "Well, I put braces on." And the phone went dead. It's like, oh, I never thought of that. Well, of course you didn't, because you don't have any experience with anything else. So when I teach students at universities, I come in and I say, we're going to learn 3 different ways to do anything. Because at some point, you're going to need a bigger armamentarium, and you can't just depend on a cookbook. And you can't depend on just a technician in Costa Rica. So, or just someone you're seeing periodically at some recurrent course that you're going to visit once in a while. So orthodontists ask orthodontists for help if they need it. The general dentist is asking someone who may not even have as much training as someone that just got out of an orthodontic residency. So I can't say that people do a bad job. Certainly I've retreated patients, but there have been patients of mine that I'm certain have been retreated by other orthodontists. It worries me to some degree because of the limited amount of training on all aspects of orthodontics, when you can go and just learn how to submit impressions and send some pictures in without a complete diagnosis and treatment plan. Just like you mentioned the Smile Care Club. Who's making who's even checking for oral cancer for these patients? Have they had a dental cleaning? When was their last dental checkup? Are there cavities? But instead, you're just giving a ball of goop, putting it in a tray, taking a selfie and sending this in and getting some trays in the mail. I might as well just do it yourself, I guess, like that one kid did that created his own trays with 3D printing.
So let's go back to supply and demand. What percent of orthodontics is mostly beauty and women as opposed to men?
Well, I don't know the percentages of that. Certainly there's more women that are orthodontic patients, but I don't know the percentage.
Do you think it's more like just barely more women than men, or do you think it's
Uh,
60-40, or do you think
yeah,
it's two-thirds
probably.
women?
I think it's probably 2/3 women.
Two-thirds
Again,
women?
I'm sure that there are stats for that. The Journal of Clinical Orthodontics probably has actual numbers for that.
And I want to switch to retention because it seems like after doing this 30 years, a lot of people had braces when they were in high school. They come back and they're getting when in their adults, 30s, 40s. And I have patients now. I can't say it on her name because I might upset my Aunt Sue that I mentioned her name on my podcast. But Aunt Sue wanted that when she turned 65. It
Right.
seems like a lot of these women that braces isn't a one-time deal. So let's talk about that retention. And do people are people probably, if they're going to live to be 100 years old, and then they really have high expectations for beautiful white, sexy, straight teeth, might be doing braces 2 or 3 times in their lifetime?
Well, if you do retain the teeth long term, then you're probably not going to have to redo treatment. But the key is retention. And I tell patients retention is a lifetime commitment of periodic wear of retention devices, or you're going to have to glue the teeth together permanently, because crowding is a normal process of aging. It happens normally. Buzz Behrens did a study, his PhD thesis at Case Western years ago was a follow-up for the Bolton study, which was started long ago, where they examined everything about the development of children. His follow-up in 1979, he called these patients back, and they took new records, and what they found was that teeth get crowded, mostly for females, mostly during the first 3 decades of life, and mostly if they've had any children. So back when I was a resident, retention was not a course. They just started to really think about it. Bob Little did his work at the University of Washington about the same time. We find that teeth get crowded with time. And there are a variety of reasons for that. But you better warn your patients that the teeth are going to move unless you hold them. And there are a variety of ways of doing that. And there's an excellent study that would be someone's career is to find out what is the best method for retention. Do you require full-time retention forever? Could you wear retainers once or twice a week? Somewhere in that continuum is the answer. But we don't know that answer right now. So the best we can do is tell patients you're going to need to wear retainers indefinitely and try them in, make sure your teeth aren't moving. Otherwise, you're probably right. Somebody's going to need to be retreated. And we are seeing more patients that were treated back in an era when they were not instructed to wear retainers forever. In fact, many times patients were told, well, after age 21, your teeth aren't going to move anymore, so you don't have to wear your retainers. Or after you got your wisdom teeth out, which were supposedly the cause of your crowding, that the teeth weren't going to move anymore. It's just not true. Teeth the only guarantee I have in my office is your teeth are going to move unless you hold them.
So I heard you right. The best retention is to euthanize your patient at the end of treatment.
Well, Bob Little once said when I was at the University of Washington, he said what you ought to do is put in fixed retainers and move your practice every 5 years.
So what is the orthodontist's favorite retention, the go-to retention after a teenager gets braces, and what is the consumer's preference?
Well, the consumers come in and they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to have retainers. So they come in, they say, I'd like a fixed retainer. So you put in a bonded retainer, like I don't like that either. Well, you're
on the mandibular?
Yeah, usually on the lower, sometimes on the upper. So you're a little bit doomed because you've got to do something. So Holly retainers are still extremely popular. Spring aligners, also fixed retainers where are glued on wires, plus then also using a clear overlay like Essex style Invisalign type retainer. Those are most common.
And what is your favorite?
Well, I used to be very much against fixed retainers. And then when patients didn't wear the retainers or they lost the retainers or broke the retainers, they come in and they would immediately, it's like, well, look, these teeth moved. It must be your fault. And I said, well, you haven't worn your retainers. But they're not hearing that. So I finally have given in. We do a majority of our patients with lower fixed retainers and then clear retainers over the top and bottom. In some instances, of course, we're still using Holly retainers. But
that reminds me of the implant lectures in the 80s. You know, you couldn't do these on smokers. You're like, okay,
right.
Well, there went my practice. Where do you practice? In some place that doesn't have because it seems like the smokers are the one losing their teeth, gum disease, that need them. I mean, it's like they're like saying I have a diet clinic, but no fat people allowed.
Right.
Talk about mini screw Anchorage.
I got involved with mini screws early on. One of my colleagues who we did a lot in writing different papers. He was from Italy. His name was Aldo Carano. He was trained in the United States also. And we started to collaborate on a number of things. And we were very interested in molar distalization for class 2 correction. And the dilemma is anchorage loss because you're subject to Newton's third law. So you're pushing molars back, but the front teeth would flare and you'd have to recover that with some round tripping. So we knew that real implants could be used to move teeth. The folks at the University of Indiana had been doing that. So the advent of the idea of using a non-osseo integrated miniature screw for anchorage support seemed very appealing. So we actually had designed a device to do that 3 years before I was ever to get a hold of a mini screw through FDA approval. Whereas in Italy, he started doing that. So we started to collaborate, write some papers, and that's developed into what now is the Horseshoe Jet with mini screws. And there's a lot of other copies of things that people that do that. So I got involved in the mini screws at the very beginning, as soon as the FDA had approval for the original screws that we had here in the States. I had 3 people come to me independently at the same meeting and say, hey, have you gotten involved with mini screw anchorage? Because it's going to revolutionize the way we do orthodontics. You're going to have to relearn how to do biomechanics. And that was Buzz Barents, Tony Gianelli, who's also deceased, and Lyle Johnston. And when these 3 guys tell you or ask you something, they're not asking, they're telling you, you are going to do this. And so I got really involved in I've used 16 different systems, and I've had somewhere north of 3,000 mini screws that I put in, and written a lot of articles and participated in a book that was published also. So what mini screws allow us to do is to improve the predictability of biomechanics that we're already doing. So the intent isn't to make things faster, it's to get to the results more predictably because you're able to control the movement of the teeth.
So when you said book, are you talking about mini implants and orthodontics?
Right. The primary author is Bjorn Ludwig, who is a brilliant orthodontist from Germany, one of the best speakers I've ever met, and he's a good friend.
And that's not on Amazon though, is it?
I think it's available now as a used book because it's been out for a few years. So you may be able to find it as a used copy.
So do you still recommend that book?
Of course, I like it. It was reviewed by a couple of journals, JCO and the AJO. Both of them had suggested it as one of the better texts in mini screws. But there are a lot of great texts in mini screws. I have I think copies of almost everything that's been published, and I can make a lot of recommendations for different books. And certainly, people that want to get involved in the use of mini screws. There's a lot of due diligence that's involved in this, and I would be certainly taking some courses with some of the experts, hands-on courses, where you're placing mini screws, whether they be in typodonts or other, even in people, learning how to do it.
You talk about creative adjuncts for clear aligners.
Right. So as I said, I got involved in Invisalign. It made a lot of sense to me because the original basis for Invisalign came from a paper written in 1945 by Harold Kessling, which is sequential use of tooth positioners. And so that's listed in their original patent, is that the idea of using a sequence of removable devices to move teeth was something that we were taught as residents because we had the Kessling family as instructors. So as soon as I saw Invisalign, I was like, this makes a lot of sense. I'm going to make this work. So I'm going to struggle along with the learning curve and find ways to make it work for me. So adding in mini screws with elastics and class 2 elastics, buttons. And so the first thing I came up with is a real common device. It's the Aligner Chewie. And it's basically a cotton roll made out of plastic to help seat the aligners, which is a dilemma. Because when you first put them in, the first new tray, as you're going through the series, when you change them, they're not fitting snugly. So you're using the Chewies to help seat them, almost like a miniature tooth positioner. And then that kind of developed into a series of pliers that I created with Hu-Friedy to be able to add in elastics and buttons and to make small changes and customize the aligners for each patient. Rather than depending on always making a new refinement, you can make them on the fly.
Hu-Friedy is that's a 100-year-old company.
Yes, it is.
Where's that about northeast? Where's that at? Do you remember?
They're in Chicago, where the basis is now, but yeah, it's been around forever.
Yeah, and you're what, halfway between Chicago and Detroit?
Yeah, so it's about 2.5 hours over to Chicago.
Yeah, Detroit was my favorite city when I was little. Motown. I mean, it seemed like
Yeah,
it seemed like when I was little, the best music in the world that came out of Motown.
absolutely.
So what do you mean by canine obedience training? Is that for your dog or your tooth?
I got involved in trying to find better ways to deal with impacted canines. And so I'm trying to get some obedience from these unruly canines. And so I came up with a couple little devices, adjuncts to what we've had in the past, which is basically either trying to lasso a canine with steel ligatures or putting on a gold chain that's bonded onto the tooth. So a couple of things I drew on cocktail napkins. One of them were these little monkey hooks, which is a way to add on multiple forces on directional forces on impacted canines. And then the second one, there's actually two of them. They're called a Kilroy spring. The name came from the appearance. It looks like the Kilroy Here's character. It's a device to extrude permanent canines in the palate, to bring them out of the bone, bring them over to the alveolar ridge. So there are two things that I've came up with and have talked about for a number of years.
So back to the millennials, when they see impacted canines, when do you need to go after those?
Well, there are some different opinions as to when is the right time to intervene. But if we go to three of the articles that have been written in the past. Sadly, these folks are deceased. One was Vince Kokich, who talked about either early exposure or early removal of the primary canines. The second would be Tiziano Bacchetti and his colleagues in Italy with Jim McNamara, where they discussed the use of a cervical headgear or palatal expansion as means to help to prevent the impaction of canines for young patients. And then once they're impacted, then there's going to have to be some sort of exposure and mechanics involved in dragging them down. So one is preventative, the other is treatment. Timing of that would be when you're going to do braces generally, if they haven't come through the tissue. So then you get into arguments as to whether or not it's a closed exposure or open exposure technique. I'm not going to get into that. That's deeper into the weeds than we need to go. But there's a lot in it, unfortunately, that we have learned from folks that are deceased. The third guy was Yuri Kural from Sweden, and he's also gone. I'm not feeling too good either. So,
well, my almost all my best friends are dead because I've read 1,000 nonfiction books in my life, and seems like the greatest lessons I've ever learned always came from a textbook from someone deceased. Back to the impacted canines. You see those on the pano, and you're wondering what age. When we were little, it was a pano. That was the new, latest, greatest thing. Now we're at CBCTs. In the spirit of trying to keep one eye on the patient, one eye on cost, doing everything faster, easier, higher quality, lower cost, is a pano still acceptable for great orthodontics, or is it really time to invest into CBCT? Can you be a great orthodontist with a two-dimensional pano?
I think you can. I think that for the majority of patients, the Panelips is just fine. For the others, that you need more information, especially in some let's just say impacted canines, you're going to need to know where specifically that tooth is in order to apply the correct mechanics. Then you're probably going to need the three-dimensional imaging. We got a lot of information from three-dimensional imaging studies. For example, Yuri Kural's study that demonstrated these impacted canines in the palate, 50% of them already caused damage to the roots of the lateral incisor, which you can't see in the two-dimensional image. That isn't going to change the fact that you need to do something about moving the tooth, but what it tells you is that you need to move the tooth away from the lateral first in order for that process of resorption to be alleviated. The concern we're going to have is the public going to allow the routine use of cone beam? And the idea is probably not. If we look at the radiation hygiene rules in the UK, they have pretty much put a damper on the use of these devices. And in fact, in the orthodontic circles, they're not permitted to take radiographs at the end of treatment. They're non-diagnostic. So what's happening is oftentimes the orthodontists are taking the records prior to the end of treatment to assess third molars, etc., root position, and they're not taking a final because it is considered to be excessive radiation. So having been at one of the British orthodontic meetings a few years ago when they had a full day on this dental hygiene issue, or excuse me, radiation hygiene issue, those rules will probably be coming here, and some of it may be that the insurance companies don't want to pay for this either. So it's, we say, well, there's not a lot of radiation with the cone beams. Well, there is some, and the public is going to be the decider, the arbiter, whether or not we get to use these things in a more routine basis. Certainly there's instances today that you wouldn't want to think about not having a cone beam, but probably for the majority of average orthodontic patients, it makes no sense to consider taking them routinely.
I wonder how many decades we would be away from an MRI type cone beam.
There's the answer for us. Yeah, the cost is so prohibitive, that's just not in the cards at the moment, but that would be the ideal answer, certainly.
I'm so old, my first CAT scan when I was little, they just brought a cat in. So talk about scar tactics, strategies for reducing demineralization stains.
Well, I think for a long time in orthodontics, we swept this under the carpet and said, okay, some of these patients are going to end up with scars on their teeth because they're not brushing their teeth. And instead of being proactive, we are reactive. We'd say, okay, well, now you need to go back to your dentist to get these things filled, or some other mechanism of dealing with them, whether it's microabrasion or maybe some sort of paste that's supposed to recalcify, etc. or maybe some sort of a resin that's poured into that decalcification. So years ago, I gave a lecture in Connecticut, and I was showing some decalcification. I was talking about this as a problem and what I might do about this. And in the feedback that the audience gave were all these condemnations of how dare you show this decalcification. And that was the point. I said, then I've got to go back and really think this over. So in the interim, I had been to the University of Washington for a mini residency in orthodontics, and one of the instructors was talking about fluoride varnishes, and they were importing them from Canada. And I thought about it, went back to my practice. I said, this might be an answer to take this out of the patient's hands. Anytime we can get things out of patient compliance issues, because you say, okay, brush your teeth, use a fluoride rinse, those might work, but unfortunately half the patients will not comply, and that's been proven. So we started to routinely use fluoride varnishes, and we do that in our practice. We use them every 3 months on our patients. And we've also participated in research. I have some colleagues in Brazil. We published a number of papers on the effectiveness in reducing the incidence and the depth of these decalcification scars. It does not completely eliminate them, but it dramatically reduces their incidence. So then the next step is there anything else we could do? So besides oral hygiene, reinforcement, referring the folks back to their hygienist or having a hygienist in your office. So the next thing was sealants. So initially I was concerned because I thought a lot of the soft drinks that we had and acidic beverages were going under the sealants. But now there's several sealants that are really your primer for your orthodontic adhesives that are, they will absorb more fluoride, or the fluoride releasing. So what we do is a combination of both. We start out with the fluoride sealant, and then we add fluoride varnishes every 3 months during the process. So we're reinforcing the fluoride on the tooth directly to the tooth. And we've had great success with that. And as I said, it doesn't eliminate all of the scarring, but anyone that asks about this, this is my recommendation. Now, with that said, I've got one more thing for you. There was a study years ago, it was done at the University of West Virginia, on argon lasers. And if you remember, argon lasers were sort of the precursor to the pack lights. It was an expensive laser. All it could do is really set bonding adhesive or composites. And they leaked argon, and they're gone. There was a study at University of Washington, or excuse me, University of West Virginia, that they used an argon laser to cure the adhesive, and they found, I believe it was a 93% reduction in decalcification, and it never has gone anywhere. For one, there's no more argon lasers. But I find that fascinating. And I've attempted to contact other folks that are in the laser field, other researchers, but to no avail over these number of years since that paper was done. Never seen a follow-up. Maybe there are people that are independently looking at this, but that's pretty fascinating.
So you think laser treating the the surface of the tooth with an argon laser could prevent decalcification?
Well, one of the experts in lasers, I was talking about this with him years ago at the University of Michigan at a course, and he said, oh, that's just not possible. It's not the right wavelength. And then I said, well, what about this research? He goes, and suddenly things just stopped. The discussion stopped. I think I hit a nerve that they may have been working on that. He said you need a CO2 laser to do this effectively. Well, now you're 3 or 4 times the cost of the argon laser. So I don't know.
I know the entrepreneur man that would figure it out. You know, AMD lasers.
Yes.
Stands for Alan Miller Design Lasers. Do you know him? Have you met
I
that
don't
guy?
think I've never met him.
Send me the email to me about what you're saying. I'll reply to you and Alan. And
Okay.
he is the most entrepreneurial laser guy I've ever known in my life. And you show him that, I'll get you two talking, and
Sounds good.
whatever it is, he'll figure it out.
Sounds good.
But I think it's funny when people say, well, to prevent demineralization, use this or do that. When they study socialized medicine advanced countries where the prescriptions are free,
right.
31% of prescriptions are never even filled.
That's correct.
And, when grandpa goes to the physician and he writes and he tells him, you need to go see these 3 different specialists and you need to get these 3 prescriptions, 1 out of 3 grandpas just walk out the door and throw those in the trash can and go home.
That's right.
I mean, people are people are more than complicated. Um, when we talk about the business of anything, faster, easier, higher quality, lower cost, there's a lot of people making claims that use our product and orthodontics will go faster. Do you think these technologies are there, or do you think they're bleeding edge? Do you think they're leading edge? Do you think they're hype or real? Uh,
I'm involved in, I just had another article published today on looking at vibration as a stimulus for tooth movement. I think that all of the things that have been proposed, there's just not enough information. There's not enough research yet. And the dilemma is claims are made without supporting research. And it is not up to us to determine whether or not these things work. It should be the company's responsibility. But when you have the company and the shareholders and a business proposition, it's easier just to advertise something and let the marketplace sort it out. Well, that's not quite fair to patients and the practitioners. So I got involved several years ago. I've done research and published papers, and I wanted to do a simple study looking at the effect of vibration on molar distalization, which is something I have 1,000 patients that I've done with this and had a lot of master's theses that have been published on our data. So I contacted this company, Excelident, and I asked them if they'd be interested in this study. It took about 3 years to get it started. And as I said earlier, it's a tough deal to do a prospective study because each treatment takes a couple of years. So it's been a 4 to 5 year process to come up with any answers, and they still are pretty much preliminary. So and it's still controversial, but at least there's been some work done on this specific device, and there are pros and cons. I mean, there are folks that have said that it doesn't do anything, and my research has shown it does do something. It does have an effect on tooth movement. But then the question is, what does that mean to the patient? It's a time value of money and a money value of time proposition. So we don't have an answer. Does it reduce treatment time? We don't know that yet for any of these particular methods of accelerated treatment. Some have been demonstrated not to work, and some have been demonstrated to do a little something, but no one can definitively say when it's completely reduced treatment time, because when is treatment done? When you're talking about occlusion, every orthodontist has a different definition of when are we finished with treatment, because you can look at a patient and you can always find something more to do.
You said something very profound, especially going on the assumption that most everyone we're talking to is a 30 and under, is that these companies launch products without research. And I go back to my 30 years. I mean, when I got out of school, I was formally taught that if she's young and gorgeous and wants the best cosmetics, to do Dicor all glass crowns and cement them with Duralon. 100% of them fractured. There was Horaeus Calzer's Art Glass. There was Ivoclar's Targus Vectors. Talk to these kids about bleeding edge versus leading edge, and that just because they see an advertisement in a journal, that it doesn't mean it's true. And what is your thoughts of analyzing a new concept and being after 30 years of saying I'm gonna let the orthodontist across the street try this for 5 years, or talk about that a little bit. Have you been burned in your 30 years by new products that claim they did something and they didn't?
I've seen people burned. I hopefully have been a little wiser, and I don't have as many things sitting in my garage as maybe some other orthodontists. I certainly have some. I've been more the one to jump on board and give it something a try. Some things I was skeptical at the beginning and wouldn't do. And others, I said, I'm going to be the first one to do it. For example, Invisalign or this Excelident or other things of that nature. So it's a caution. Be cautious. I was taught to be skeptical. My chairman of my department was Lyle Johnston, who's he's the conscience of orthodontics and probably one of the most skeptical orthodontists that we've had. And as a result, I've learned to look at things very carefully. And if there isn't an answer, maybe try to look for one. And that may come from the literature first. You have to do your due diligence. And just don't depend on an advertisement. Don't depend on your buddy that graduated with you to tell you what's the right thing. He might have the right answer, but it's best to verify. So proceed cautiously. I don't always do that. And if it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, it just may not be. So the key that I teach students is to be skeptical of everyone and everything, including me.
I remember I was having dinner, this is 10, 20 years ago, with the CEO of Dentsply. And his name
Yes,
was John Miles. And he said, dentists are the most brand loyal people because if what they're doing works, they're,
right,
don't fix what's not broken. And if they use a product and it works, and all these other companies say, mine's better, faster, easier, they're like, okay, well, if this works, why would I risk
right,
trying something new? Because when you're a dentist, you got enough things that aren't going the way you'd like. So why would you start altering what's going right? I mean, just so for you young kids out there, if you're gonna start changing up your technique, why don't you work on the techniques where it's not working first, and let's not disturb the
right.
technique that's working.
Oh,
Gosh, I asked you for an hour. You already gave me an 10. Can I ask one last overtime question?
sure.
You talk about entrepreneurial operating system, traction, management of practice. What's all that about?
About 2 to 3 years ago, as you mature in your practice, you're looking for new ways to refine what you're doing. And I've been successful in what I've done, but I was looking for ways to make things better and working with different consultants. I had my accountant tell me about a book called Traction by Gino Wishman, Wichman is his last name, and it's about it's basic, simple
Hear that?
tools.
Can you repeat the name of the book one more
Yeah,
time?
it's Traction.
Traction.
I love the cat. I love the cat.
Traction, written by who?
Gino Wishman,
Okay.
Wichman.
Okay.
And so I read the book and I thought, well, that's nice, but I got other things to do. And, I was talking about different aspects of the practice and managing staff and going through changes in computer system. And once again, he said, you need to read this book again. And by good fortune, one of the partners in this company is here in Kalamazoo. And so Don Tinney is the person that we brought in. It's not a guru type thing. This is a person that comes in to teach folks that really don't know much about management how to manage and how to make decisions and how to organize meetings that are valuable. And it's been such a dramatic change in our practice for the good in making us more organized in every aspect of what we do. I'm at a point where I like to proselytize and tell folks at least take a look at the book. There's lots of management books out there. This is a simple series of tools to help improve your management.
That is, I just found that book on Amazon, and it's all great reviews. I mean, 4.5 stars average with over 400 reviews. Um, and we put on Dental Town. Do you only lecture to orthodontists, or do you lecture to general dentists?
I've done some general dental lectures, yes.
But we have online CE for Orthotown. Now we have two websites: Dentaltown, Orthotown.
Right?
Orthotown you can only get on the website if you're an orthodontist.
Correct.
General Dentaltown is for the rest.
Right.
But
And I've had a couple of articles published in Orthotown.
oh, is that right? See,
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to go on Orthotown. I own the website, so I really don't have anything to do with it. And I'm good with that. On Dentaltown, we started something that was very bizarre. We started a private groups because that's what I see Orthotown is. So a lot of dentists would tell me, I want to go ask, I don't want to show a failed case, a failed root canal, and have everybody see it. I want to start a private group because they have like 4 or 5 buddies from dental school. So we said, fine, we'll set up private groups where you can't enter it, you can request, but whoever starts the private group is the only one that can accept you or deny you. And I cannot believe how much that took off. I mean, there's just
Sure.
I totally understand, and that's also I get probably the most requests on Dental Town is they don't think there should be anonymous posters. because you post a case and then some anonymous person is critiquing it. They're like, hey, I post this. But the reason I allow anonymous is because I know who everyone is. We
Sure.
verify. It takes 2 full-time people to verify everyone, but there has to be a place to ask a stupid question, and you're not going to get on there and post a failed root canal if you think
Right.
everybody's going to see it and laugh at you or whatever, whatever. So I appreciate that the orthodontists only want their own group. I appreciate there's 1,000 private groups on Dental Town where anywhere from 5 to 100 people just want to talk amongst themselves. I get that, but you're so amazing. If you ever want to write an article for Dental Town or do an online C course for Dental Town or an online C course for Ortho Town, um, the reason that means so much to me is because when I go to dental schools in Africa and Asia,
Sure.
so many of those dental schools, I mean, I walked in there and the dean started crying because their textbooks are 20 years old
Yeah.
and they say the whole curriculum is Dental Town. And it
Interesting.
just this internet. There's 2 million dentists on Earth with 10 million employees, billing out $500 billion a year on this planet, $500 billion. And what I'm so excited about the internet and now the smartphone is that I think the smartphone is going to flatten the inequalities of information. I mean,
Absolutely.
isn't it amazing to think that in 1880, 80% of the planet could not read or write? And
Right.
now 80% of the planet lives in a house or a hut where someone has a Samsung
Right.
or an iPhone. I'll never forget the fact that I was born in 62. When I was 72, in 1972, when I was 10, my mom bought our first set of encyclopedias that was made in 52. So my first it was like 24 books, 20 years old, and I thought I was in heaven.
Oh,
Me
I
and
bet.
my 5 sisters would just sit there on the floor looking at all the pictures and reading everything from Mars to Jupiter. And now
Sure.
to think you get an iPhone and
All
Wikipedia
that.
is 52 million pages long and there's 300 million websites. Crazy.
It
I
is.
think it's going to be humans' best century. The next
Yeah.
100 years will be our best century ever. I really
I
believe it.
like to be around for a part of it.
Well, hey, seriously, thank you so much for coming on my show today and talking to my homies. You're so smart. You're so informative. But you got to explain those two uniforms behind you.
Well,
What?
my office is filled with all kinds of memorabilia. This happens to just be a private office, and one's the Kalamazoo Wings, which is a local minor league hockey team. The other's the Kalamazoo Growlers, which is a local baseball team. So I just put them up to give a little background. But yeah, there's a lot of hockey jerseys and guitars and all kinds of stuff in the office. So Star Wars
But
stuff.
how do you rationalize the ethics of supporting hockey, which knocks out more teeth than any sport in the world?
Well, I tell them to wear a mouth guard. So, and there have been players with braces on, by the way.
Well, it's funny when you're watching the Arizona Coyotes when
Yeah.
they're on the bench and the cameras are panning that bench. Every single one of them is missing front teeth.
Yes. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, my cat enjoyed your show too. She's jumped up here 3 times, so she must like
Great.
what she hears too. Thanks so much for being on my show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Howard. I really appreciate it. You've been fantastic.
All right, happy holidays to you, buddy.
Same to you. Merry Christmas.